And by the way, look at the eyes expanded. It was intended to be my secret enjoyment, a chance to break free from the oppressive repetition of my days in this place. Philip was always traveling on business, leaving me alone with my thoughts. And the deafening stillness of a too-large home. But now standing in the living room with Lucas, looking at me in shocked awareness, my secret was revealed. "What the hell?" he mumbled, staring down at the little remote in his palm, before returning his eyes to me. I tried to recover to pretend that wasn't what he expected. But my body betrayed me. The burning in my cheeks, the inability to meet his gaze. It all told him the reality I so wanted to ignore. His voice fell low and incredulous. "This is yours, right, Lucas?" "Don't," I said quietly, stepping back, but he wouldn't let this go. He moved closer, holding the remote up as evidence in court. "So what happens when I press it again?" Lucas, click. I gasped, my breath catching, as the item in question did precisely what it was supposed to accomplish. My knees felt weak, so I grasped the couch's edge for balance. His countenance transformed from a taunting smile to something deeper and more serious. And that was when everything changed. Philip had always been a man with ambition, something I previously respected. However, he was now resentful. Marriage began with promises of collaboration and a life, shared equally. But somewhere along the road, I became an ornament, a piece of decor in his well-managed life. He worked ceaselessly, his mind always on the next business, merger or flight to someplace far away. At first, I attempted to fill the emptiness. I immersed myself in refurbishing our enormous house, throwing dinner parties and volunteering for local charity. But the freshness had worn off and loneliness set in. A violent anguish that intensified with each passing year. The appearance of Lucas had not helped. Lucas was Philip's first marital son, and I had little contact with him until he moved in with us at age 23. He was everything Philip wasn't. Impulsive, passionate, and unflinchingly honest. He had the ability to fill a room with his magnetic presence, making it difficult to ignore him. He had returned from college a few months before, after a disagreement with his mother regarding his future. Philip, ever the fixer, gave him a place to stay while he thought things through. I suspected it was about control rather than kindness. Philip never liked to leave things unresolved, and he couldn't ignore Lucas's independence. I didn't expect to feel anything for Lucas, other than the courteous disinterest of a stepmother. But from the minute he came, there was an unsaid, unrecognized tension between us that persisted. The day everything changed began as any other. Had departed early for a week-long business trip, leaving the home strangely quiet. I spent the morning tidying up, attempting to alleviate the uneasiness that had been seeping in. For weeks, I was in the living room, changing the throw cushions on the couch when Lucas walked in. He was barefoot, his hair still moist from the shower, and holding a coffee mug with the words, "World's Okest Son," written on the side. "Morning," he mumbled, slumping onto the couch. "Morning," I said with a forced smile. He grabbed the TV remote and flipped mindlessly through the channels. "You don't mind, right?" "Of course not," I said. By the fact that his casual presence had already worried me. As he leaned back, his palm touched something between the couch cushions. Frowning, he reached down and took it out. "What is this?" he asked, handing out a little black remote. My stomach sank. I recognized it right away. Sleek, inconspicuous controller I thought I had stashed away carefully. Nothing, I answered hastily, my tone rougher than I intended. He lifted an eyebrow, a smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Nothing, eh? So why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" I stepped up and said, "Lucas." "Give it to me," he drew it back. His smile broadening, "Relax. I am just wondering, what is it for?" "Some type of audio system." I grabbed for the remote, but he avoided me and kept it out of reach. "Lucas, I'm serious." "Return it," and then he pressed the button. Expression on his face changed instantaneously as the knowledge hit. His smear disappeared, replaced by something altogether else. Curiosity, amusement, and a hint of something evil. "This is yours," he inquired, his tone mild yet deliberate. I didn't respond, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Oh, it is," he said, resting back against the couch. "Interesting, please, Lucas. Just give it to me and forget about this." He cocked his head, looking at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. I do not believe I can forget this. I swallowed forcefully, my hands twitching as I grabbed for the remote again. But he didn't move, his gaze fixed on me. "What more are you concealing, Evelyn? Is this Evelyn longer?" I begged Lucas stop. But even my words sounded feeble. He leaned forward and held the remote just out of reach. "Why are you frightened? I'll discover who you truly are." Something inside me cracked. The weight of years of trying to be someone I wasn't came crashing down at once. "You don't know anything about me," I said, my voice quivering with rage. "Then tell me," he replied, his voice quiet but urgent. We both remained still for an extended period of time. The tension between us was excruciating, and the air was charged with what we didn't say. And then, without thinking, I ripped the remote from his grasp and walked out of the room. I spent the remainder of the day avoiding him. The meeting's weight was pressing down on me like a physical force. However, no matter how hard I tried, the memory of his voice, his eyes, and the way he stared at me, as if he could see through every mask I had ever worn, persisted. That night, while I lay awake in bed, I heard a faint knock on the door. "Evelyn." His speech was soft and tentative. I did not respond, my heart beating as I heard him unlock the door and step inside. "We need to talk," he added, his voice lower now. "Go back to bed, Lucas," I replied, my voice quivering. "He did not move, not until you revealed the truth." I turned to face him. My breath caught as I noticed the passion in his gaze. "What truth?" I whispered. His stare did not waver. "The truth about you." "About us?" His words hung in the darkness like an open door, tempting me to walk through the reality about us. The room seemed stifling. My thoughts collided as I tried to locate a firm foundation. "There is no us, Lucas," I murmured, my voice quivering. He moved closer, his figure highlighted by the faint gleam of moonlight seeping through the curtains. "You do not believe that?" "Not after today." I sat up and pulled the blanket tightly about me, as if it might protect me from the weight of his stare. What happened today was a mistake or misunderstanding. "You keep telling yourself that," he continued, his own calm, but firm. "But we know it's more than that." I tried to deny it and push him away. but the truth was already coming out. The days that followed were a jumble of anxiety and averted looks. Lucas appeared pleased to wait, allowing me to fight with my own ideas while he continued on, as if nothing had happened. But it did. Every time we passed each other in the home, the air felt thicker, full of unsaid words and stolen glances. It was a peaceful afternoon when the dam eventually broke. Philip was still gone, leaving the home peaceful, except for the gentle hum of the dishwasher in the kitchen. I was folding clothes in the living room when Lucas entered, his countenance inscrutable. "We need to talk," he continued, his voice steady but stern. I did not glance up. "There is nothing to talk about." "Stop lying to yourself, Evelyn," he murmured, moving closer. "You aren't terrified of this because it is incorrect. You are terrified because it seems right." I slipped the garment into my palms. I muttered. Don't what?" he inquired. His voice gentler now. "Don't reveal the truth. Or remind yourself of something you already know." I turned to face him and my chest tightened as I caught his. "What you do not comprehend what you are saying." He looked into my eyes and replied, "I understand more than you think. I've been watching you, Evelyn. I've noticed how lonely you are and how hard you try to disguise it." Tears welled up at the corners of my eyes and I glanced away, unable to hold his stare any longer. "This is not about me, it is," he replied, drawing closer. "It's about me, too. I'm not a kid, Evelyn. I know how I feel, and I believe you do, too." His words hovered between us, challenging me to reject them, but I could not. The first time it happened, it was nearly an accident. We were in the library, a space Philip seldom visited, but that I had designated as my refuge. I was standing by the window, gazing out at the garden when Lucas strolled in. "I didn't intend to terrify you," he replied quietly. "You didn't," I said, my hands trembling as I put down the book I hadn't been reading. He closed the door behind him, his footfall gentle on the carpet as he moved across the room. "I have been thinking about you, Lucas." He cut me off, saying, "I can't stop. No matter how hard I try, I can't keep you out of my thoughts." I turned to face him. My heart pounded as he came to a halt only inches away. "This needs to end." He shook his head, his gaze locked on me. "You do not want it to stop." "Neither do I." His remarks acted as a spark, breaking down the last of my resistance. Before I could think or stop myself, I reached for him, brushing my fingers across his as he closed the gap between us. The days that followed were exciting and terrible. We were vigilant, looking for evidence of inquisitive eyes or suspicious stares. The mansion became a minefield of secrets, with each room presenting its own set of dangers and rewards. In the kitchen, we brushed hands as we walked by the sink. In the corridor, a little touch on my arm sent shivers down my spine. In the library, under the cover of darkness, we murmured confessions that seemed more hazardous than any physical act. However, the pleasure of concealment came with a price. Every snatched moment served as a reminder of the border we had crossed, the regulations we had broken, and the lives we were putting in danger. The first significant threat to our secret came from Victor, Lucas's childhood pal. He had dropped in unannounced one evening, smooth charm concealing a biting wit that made me uncomfortable. Victor said his attention drawn to the family portraits on the mantel. Lucas always felt his father married well. I managed a pleasant grin as Lucas tensed next to me. "We like it," I stated simply. Victor grinned, his gaze shifting between the two of us. "You seem close," he said. His tone tinged with something I couldn't quite identify. "Victor." Lucas spoke with a threatening tone. "Let us not make things difficult." Victor raised his hands in faint surrender, but the sight in his eyes told me he was still digging. Later that night, Lucas approached me in the kitchen, his countenance stern. "He knows something," he explained, his voice low. "Victor," I inquired, my stomach churning. "He's not stupid," Lucas responded. "And he has always been jealous of me. If he figures it out, I don't need him to finish the phrase." The stakes were already high enough, without having another player in the game. "What do we do?" I inquired, my voice wavering. Lucas grabbed for my hand, his touch solid and comforting. "We stick to the plan and no one finds out." I nodded, but the knot in my gut just became tighter. The tenuous equilibrium we had maintained began to shift, and it wasn't long before cracks appeared in our carefully crafted veneer. The first issue was from Philip's business colleague. Emma was a clever and ambitious lady who had a habit of intruding where she wasn't wanted. Emma had always been a part of Philip's work life, attending his dinners, supervising his projects, and becoming involved in his personal problems whenever possible. She was charming in a way that fooled most people, but I never trusted her. It started innocently enough. Emma popped over one day when Philip was gone. Equipped with a bottle of wine and a false sense of companionship, "I thought you'd appreciate some company." She continued offering me the bottle with an overly bright smile. I mustered a grin and ushered her into the kitchen. "Emma, it is really sweet of you." "I was not expecting anyone." She shrugged her gaze, roaming the room with the accuracy of someone, documenting every aspect. "Philip stated that you've been spending more time at home recently. I thought I would check in." Her statements were nonchalant, but they had an edge to them that made me uncomfortable. I said, "Just keeping things in order while he's away," with a casual tone. Emma's attention shifted to the open door, leading to Lucas in the corridor. And Lucas, how is he adjusting? I froze for a half second. It was hardly apparent, yet it caused my heart to beat. "He's okay." "Why are you asking?" Emma cocked her head, sly smile forming on her lips. "Oh, there's no reason. He's grown up a lot since I last saw him. Don't you think?" Her words lingered in the air, full of meaning. Later that evening, I found Lucas in the study. His face strained as he looked out the window. "Emma was here," I announced, gently closing the door behind me. He turned to face me, his jaw clenched. What did she want to make herself feel better? I said, the hatred in my voice clear. Lucas moved forward, his brow furrowing. "She suspects something, doesn't she?" "I don't know," I acknowledged, settling into one of the seats. "But she is watching us. I can feel it." Lucas kneeled in front of me, hands resting on the chair's arms. "We'll manage her," he replied quietly and steadily. "Lucas, no," he interrupted, his gaze fixed on mine. "I will not let her spoil this. I refuse to let anyone destroy this." Victor caused the second problem. His visit was unexpected and unwanted. He arrived late one night, smirking like he owned the house, with all of his typical confidence and might. "I thought I'd crash here for a while." he declared. He dropped his duffel bag in the entryway. Lucas tensed next to me, his stance quickly protective. "You could have phoned," he replied with a tight tone. Victor grinned and clapped Lucas on the shoulder. "Where's the pleasure in that?" He turned to face me, his smile expanding. "Evelyn, don't you mind?" "Of course not," I replied, my stomach churning at the thought of him staying beneath our house. Victor's presence was an ongoing source of friction. He had a knack of insinuating himself into every discussion and encounter, his biting humor constantly teetering on the verge of becoming nasty. Victor reclined back in his chair one evening. As we were sitting in the living room, his eyes shifting between Lucas and me. "You two have gotten close," he said, his tone light but penetrating. Lucas tensed and his jaw tightened. "Victor, we reside in the same house." "What are you expecting?" Victor chuckled and swirled his tumbler of whiskey. "Fair point, but still. You appear to spend an inordinate amount of time together." I faked a giggle, wanting to ease the tension. "Lucas has been assisting me with various household work, which has been a welcome distraction." Victor's smile did not change. "I will bet." One afternoon, Victor and Emma crossed paths at the home, marking a pivotal moment. Emma had come by unexpectedly again. Her interest was certainly piqued. Victor, ever the opportunist, wasted little time ingratiating himself to her. Beck's discussion was full of carefully veiled jabs and veiled looks in my direction. Emma said, her attention drawn to the family portraits on the mantel. Victor smiled as he leaned against the arm of the couch. "Oh, you must see the dynamics." "It's intriguing." Emma's smile was harsh and her eyes narrowed slightly. "I bet it is." That evening, as I walked around the kitchen, Lucas rushed in, his fury palpable. "Victor is going to wreck everything," he snarled, slamming a glass on the counter. "I understand," I said, my voice quivering. "He's already sniffing about." And Emma has joined in. "It won't take long for one of them to put the components together." "What do we do?" I inquired, the weight of the situation bearing down on me. Lucas slumped against the counter, head in his hands. "We need to get ahead of this before others do." The atmosphere in the house was excruciating, and each moment was a cautious dance around reality. But no matter how hard we tried, the walls kept closing in. The first break came when Emma confronted me in the corridor. Her tone calm, but her words sharp. "You've been quiet lately, Evelyn," she replied, her grin harsh. "Is there anything you would want to share?" I faked a giggle and shook my head. "Not at all, I'm just busy with the house." Emma cocked her head, her gaze narrowing slightly. Funny. That was what Philip said the last time we spoke. So what precisely did he say? Emma smiled wider. "Just that everything seems different around here." That night, Lucas and I gathered in the library, the weight of the day bearing down on us. "We're running out of time," he replied quietly. "I know," I muttered, tears welling in my eyes. "I'm not sure how much longer we can keep this up." Lucas moved closer, his hand brushing against mine. "We'll work this out together." But even as he said it, I could feel the walls closing in. The unavoidable truth threatening to destroy all we constructed. Victor's acute perception and Emma's inquisitive gaze made the encounter unavoidable. The strands of our secret unraveled, quicker than I could keep them together. Every gaze and accidental phrase seemed like a trap, a moment that may reveal the truth. The tipping moment occurred on a rainy evening. Rain pelted the windows and thunder echoed through the house. Philip had arrived abruptly, infusing the room with a hushed anxiety. I assumed he was in the study with Emma discussing business. Lucas and I attempted to keep the appearance of normalcy, but everything came apart when Philip summoned me to the study. I entered gingerly, my palms moist from smoothing the fabric of my blouse. Emma sat on the edge of the desk, her face perfectly blank, but there was a sparkle in her eyes that made my stomach churn. Philip stood near the window with his back to me, one hand grasping a glass of scotch. "Close the door," he murmured without looking around. I obeyed. My heart is beating. "What's happening?" I inquired, attempting to keep my voice calm. Philip turned his expression inscrutable. "I believe you know, Philip." "Stop," he said sharply. He motioned to Emma, who passed a packet across the desk to me. I snatched it up, my hands quivering, and flipped it open. Inside, there were hazy but incriminating photographs of Lucas and me, in the garden at the library. Even in the kitchen, stray looks are recorded as pieces of evidence in a prosecution. My breath froze and I turned up to see Philip looking at me, his face a mix of betrayal and rage. "What's this?" I inquired, my tone barely above a whisper. "You tell me," Philip responded, his tone chilly. Lucas stormed into the study, his presence like a thunderclap. "What's happening?" he demanded, his gaze shifting between Philip and myself. Philip responded with piercing sarcasm. "Perfect timing." He held out one of the photographs. "Can you explain this?" Lucas's jaw stiffened, but he refused to back away. "Have you been spying on us?" "Spying?" Philip laughed without humor. "Do you believe I need to spy? To recognize when anything is amiss in my own home." "Philip, this is not what you believe." I started, but he cut me off. "Do not disrespect me, Evelyn. You two have been lying to me for months." Emma cleared her throat, her words calm and measured. "Perhaps we should all step back. Emotions are running high." "Stay out of this, Emma." Lucas snapped, his temper boiling. Emma lifted her hands in faint submission, but smile on her face revealed she was enjoying the show. The debate became out of hand with accusations flying back and forth. Philip charged Lucas with treachery, of abusing my loneliness. Lucas retaliated, calling Philip a negligent spouse who only worried about his image. Lucas said, "You were never there for her. You left her alone in this house like a ghost. And you opted to be the one to soothe her." Philip answered, his voice full of scorn. I stood paralyzed, my heart shattering, as the two most important men in my life ripped each other apart. Emma's final revelation proved to be the pivotal moment. "You know, Philip," she said, her tone almost casual, "if you want loyalty, you might want to look into your own concerns." Philip froze, his stare fixed on her. "What on earth are you discussing?" Emma grinned, knowing that her victory was complete. "Oh, come on. Did you honestly believe I didn't know? What about all the late nights? What about excursions with clients? You've been playing this game far longer than Evelyn." The room became quiet. The weight of her words hung over us like a smothering cloud. "You're lying," Philip muttered, his voice low and menacing. Emma shrugged. "Believe anything you want, but think twice before you fling stones." Philip rushed out of the room, his anger evident, followed, her smirk still intact. Lucas and I were left alone in the aftermath. the quiet thick with unspoken words. "This is my fault," I muttered, tears flowing down my cheeks. Number Lucas stepped closer. "This is theirs and not your responsibility." I shook my head, my remorse threatening to overwhelm me. "I have damaged everything." Lucas clasped my face in his palms and maintained a steady look. "You have not damaged anything. We'll go through this together." I wanted to trust him, but the storm we'd unleashed seemed uncontrollable. The photographs were leaked the next day. I'm not sure how they got out. Emma's interference, Philip's fury, or Victor's jealousy. But by dawn, our lives were front-page news. The headlines were savage, portraying us as villains in a controversy that gripped the community. Philip released a cold and calculating statement, portraying himself as the victimized person. In an interview, Philip asserted, his voice heavy with fake sadness, "Betrayal by those closest to you is the ultimate wound." Lucas and I were demonized, our reputations dragged by newspapers looking for controversy. The house's walls reminded me of a jail. The voices and eyes from the outside world are closing in. That evening, as the sun began to set, Lucas packed a backpack. "We can't remain here." He insisted, his tone firm. "Where should we go?" I inquired, my tone barely above a whisper. "Anywhere but here," he said, "as long as we are together." I gazed around the home, my life disintegrating in front of me. I had no idea what the future contained, but I knew I couldn't handle life without him. Taking his hand, I plunged into the unknown, leaving nothing but the hope of what we may become. The trip was quiet, save for the regular buzz of the tires on the road. Lucas gazed straight ahead, his jaw stiff while I grasped the edge of my seat, my fingers throbbing from the pressure I was applying. Every mile between us and the home seemed like a breath of fresh air after drowning. Yet it wasn't enough to lift the burden of what we'd left behind. The hotel Lucas discovered was modest and nondescript, nestled along the side of a deserted roadway. The neon sign buzzed weakly, throwing an eerie glow across the parking lot. "We'll remain here for the night," he added, taking our luggage from the back seat. I nodded, too worn out to argue. Inside the room, I slid into the bed, my hands quivering. The news had already started to circulate. My phone buzzed constantly with missed calls and messages, each one binding me to the disaster we left behind. I switched it off and dropped it on the nightstand, as if it burnt my flesh. Lucas kneeled in front of me, his hands delicately resting on my knees. "Hey," he whispered quietly, his voice drawing me back into the present. "We'll get through this." I looked into his eyes, looking for the confidence I lacked. "How everything is coming apart." "Allow it," he said forcefully. "Let everything fall apart. We'll start afresh, just you and me." My eyes welled up with tears as I shook my head. "You do not comprehend this will be with us forever. People will not forget. Then we'll make them forget," he whispered, tightening his grasp on me. "We'll learn to live with it. But I'm not going to let them take you away from me." His comments provided me with a sense of stability when I was on the verge of losing control. I wanted to believe him that we could get out of this mess together. However, the world was not so easily escaped. By dawn, the controversy had reached its climax. Photos of Lucas and myself were splattered throughout every news channel, with scathing headlines. According to one source, a step-family scandal has rocked aristocratic circles. Another stated from housewife to headline. The affair that shattered a family. Lucas sat next to me, browsing through his phone. His expression inscrutable. They're portraying us as monsters, he whispered. They're not incorrect, I said quietly, the guilt hanging on me. He turned abruptly to me, his voice angry. Do not mention that you are not a monster, Evelyn. You are human. You owe no one an apology for it. The hotel phone abruptly rang, its loud tone breaking through the silence. Lucas and I shared a glance before he scooped up hello. His look grew darker as he listened. We are not interested, he stated, before slamming the phone down. Who was it, I inquired, my stomach churning reporters. He said bitterly, they found us. By the time we left the hotel, the media had already gathered. A dark vehicle was parked near the entrance, its occupants pretending to look at a map, while their cameras appeared through the shattered windows. Lucas saw them first and tightened his grasp on my hand. He murmured, Don't look at them, and LED me to the car. I nodded and kept my head down as we slipped inside. The engine screamed to life and Lucas sped out of the parking lot, the car following at a distance. Where should we go? Now, I inquired, my voice wavering. Somewhere they won't find us, he said, his gaze fixated on the rear-view mirror. We landed ourselves at a little beach village many hours away, a spot where the sea wind held the promise of anonymity. The motel we visited was older but tidy, with a damaged sign, offering seaside views that were barely visible in the fog. I stood by the window of our room, watching the waves smash against the coast, while Lucas paced behind me. The tension between us was apparent, with the weight of all we'd lost pushing down on us. Do you regret this? He asked abruptly, his voice breaking through the silence. As I turned to face him, my chest tightened. What? Come with me, he pleaded, his voice tinged with sadness, leaving everything behind. I hesitated because the reality was too difficult to put into words. I do not know eventually admitted it. I'm not sure how I feel anymore. His look softened and he approached, grasping my hands in his. I understand it's not simple, but I meant it when I vowed I'll never let them take you from me. We will find a way to go ahead together. I wanted to believe him, that the tempest we had been through was behind us. But when I peered into his eyes, I couldn't get rid of the uncertainty. That lingered in the back of my mind. The days went into weeks and we fell into a fragile pattern. Lucas secured multiple jobs to maintain our financial stability, while I maintained a low profile, avoiding contact with the outside world whenever feasible. However, the echoes of our history were never far away. Every tap on the door and every unknown face felt like a danger or a reminder that the controversy we had left behind may find us. At any time one evening as we sat on the beach watching the sunset, Lucas grabbed from my hand. Do you believe we will ever be rid of this? He inquired gently. I glanced at him, my heart breaking at the tenderness in his voice. I don't know, I admitted honestly. But I know I don't want to confront this alone. I allowed myself to believe as the sun fell below the horizon, painting the landscape in gold and pink. We could finally find serenity after a long time. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together.